Anyway, a lot of the people that are acting in them are not alive anymore. I'll be honest with
Vintage, vintage.
you. Jesus, God, they had some.
They all run Jeremy specials.
God, they had some hairstyles in the 70s. Never heard of a razor.
Fucking hell. Uh,
Yeah, not bombshell. Are you ready?
End me now. Yeah, I'm ready.
Hello and welcome all into the MO podcast. As always, you're here with me, Contumacious Ant.
And me, Atreya.
And today we are going to be covering the alleged gang that is the smiley-faced killers.
Ooh.
So, this, I think, it's alleged that there is a group of unknown killers. So basically, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte have postulated, that's them two, have postulated, they're both retired New York police detectives. And
They look like TV show detectives.
They do, don't they? They proper look like NCIS people. So they've kind of postulated that there is a group of killers that operate inside the US, and apparently now they're going international, and they prey upon young men, like college age young men, and they murder these people and leave their bodies at or near a smiley face graffiti sign.
Why? Why do they choose these people?
This is the reason that it kind of falls apart for me. I don't know what they're getting out of it. It kind of like maybe like a Son of Sam kind of thing, like they may be filming it, selling it on the dark web, snuff films, perhaps.
I mean, though, like, yeah, okay. That means they can't use the same location twice.
Yeah. No, they don't. And like they operate. There's been a lot of these. Apparently, these they've got numbers in the hundreds of people that have been killed, but it's it is yeah. We'll get into it, and then we'll see what we all think about it. I mean, the first case that kicked this all off, it was in 1997, and it was the murder, or the death, I should say, of Patrick McNeil. Now, Patrick went out. He went missing from uptown Manhattan while on a night out in the New York winter. Kevin Gannon was the lead investigator on this case, and he promised Patrick's parents that he would find the killer. He was 100% sure that Patrick had been killed. Now, reports differ on his age, which is a little bit weird because it's been claimed that he was 20 years old. The New York Times quoted his age as 20. Other sources quote 21, and I even seen one that was quoted at 23.
How hard is it to get his age right?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure about. I think New York Times, I think we'll go with that one, 20, and you will kind of see why that one makes more sense, because he'd been out drinking with some of his college friends at a bar called the Dapper Dog on 16th of February. Now, the bar was kind of a student bar, but obviously the legal drinking age in America is 21. So if he was 20, he shouldn't have really been in there. But
Naughty boy.
But the Dapper Dog, which has now actually closed down, it did have a lot of violations of serving underage customers and serving not really caring if people were too drunk to be served.
I feel like it's the pub out of Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to
What
be
year were you born?
yeah, before Simon Pegg
1942.
gets involved.
Yeah.
56. So that's what makes sense to me. Him being 20, that he's had all these violations at the Dapper Dog. Now, what they'd do is they'd have a guest bartender night. So basically, they just pluck someone from the crowd to do a shift behind the bar. Free labour, innit? Really. But I think more of the thought
Free
process.
drinks.
Well, yeah, more of the thought process was that person would be working there, and they'd bring all their friends in because they'd be like, "Yeah, I'm working, so you can come in." So then more people would kind of go in. But
Have free drinks.
yeah, exactly.
Put themselves out of business really quickly.
Exactly. I mean, and they're all students as well, so I think this was a bad idea from the start, really, by the
Definitely.
management of the Dapper Dog. But the bar apparently had like a frat house atmosphere. It was like Weatherspoons when they've all got the dole paid out. You know, it's kind of one of them, and they didn't really care about how drunk people got. They'd still serve them, which I've never actually been refused
Same.
drink. And there's some points where I've gone, I should have been refused a drink the next day.
Same.
But I don't really think that's a massive common thing, to be honest. I mean, I know bartenders do have a duty of protection, a duty of care. And if someone states they're going to drive home, then... But it's hard
Fair
to get
enough,
involved. Yeah, it's hard to get involved with that kind of situation. Because if you refuse someone, they go, I'm not fucking drunk. And then they start kicking off. And sometimes it's just easier to give them another beer and let them fall asleep with the head on the bar.
I always use really long words when I'm drunk, as if to prove that I'm not drunk, because I can still use really long words, which only makes me sound drunker. I think you're discombobulated, actually. Just spurting bullshit. I feel like bartenders only like say no if you're literally like vomiting all over yourself, kind of shit.
Yeah. I mean, I do have a story. It's not a nice story, but when I worked as a bartender when I was in Brussels, there's a drink there. I mean, in Brussels, all the drinks are super powerful. Anyway, they're like 6.8%, but there's a beer called Duval, and it's 8.3%. And a gentleman at the bar was drinking Duval, and we never used to charge. We just put up a tab for people, and then they pay at the end of the night. So the end of the night came round, and this guy was like, oh, "Can I have my bill?" Gave him the bill, and he was like, "Oh, I've never drank 12 Duval. If I drank 12 Duval, I wouldn't even be able to stand." And then he fell off his chair. So I was like, "Yeah, maybe you have." He then went and absolutely destroyed the toilet. So it wasn't a good situation. Thankfully, I didn't have to clean it, but it was everywhere. The guy I was working with, who was the boss, opened the door and went, "Jesus!" And I went, "Ooh, good luck with that one." But yeah, and even after 12 Duval, there was no way I was going to go, "I'm not going to serve you." The only reason that he wanted his bill is because we were closing. That's kind of the only reason. And unless someone's being violent or being a dick, you don't really refuse people. But anyway, so back to this about Patrick McNeil. On this particular night, the guest bartender was one of Patrick's housemates. Now apparently this housemate didn't like him, and even though Patrick knew this, he went along as a show of support for his housemate. Now, the reason why this particular person didn't like him, and a few other people didn't like him, because he was they all thought he was a little bit of a womanizer, and he spent too much time on his looks, and he was very preening over himself. But considering it's like 1997, I don't think this is feminism for these guys. I think this is a little bit incelly, because he was just swooping in, getting all these women, and they were like,
Yeah, it was jealousy, definitely.
Can't get laid.
Yeah,
Kind
100%.
of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's just more jealousy that these people didn't like him. Now, Patrick left in the early hours, and he was waiting outside for a female friend who had just popped into the bathroom. But for whatever reason, she was taking too long. 12 Duval, maybe. But he didn't wait, and he just started wandering off.
Some friend he is.
Exactly. And this guy is a womanizer, and he's like, fuck that, can't be arsed waiting for her.
Plenty more fish in the sea, pet.
Yeah. She's probably not even white front to back, to be honest. So he left. Now, I think this was more due to the state that he was in, because as he walked down the street, he was seen by other people as visibly stumbling, and he did fall over a couple of times. He went to get the subway, which was like 2 blocks away, but a few passers-by noticed him, so that's kind of how bad in a state he was. Now, by all accounts, he'd not really drunk that much that night, and because he was kind of a regular, he could take his drink, let's say. So there was a little bit of maybe he'd been roofied, maybe someone had put something in his drink for him to cause this.
Or maybe he just went out on an empty stomach.
What?
Maybe he just went out on an empty stomach.
A cheap night, yeah.
Exactly. Sorry if
So,
I've thrown a spanner in your plot there.
well, you could have done, but the onlookers, the passers-by that noticed him, also noticed a SUV that was following him. Now, every time Patrick would stumble, the car would stop. And once he'd picked himself up and walked off, the car would start to follow him. Now, it was parked up outside the bar earlier on, so someone did actually get a partial registration plate out of this. But again, nothing ever came of it.
Was it Smiley 5?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking an SUV is not the most subtle of cars to tail somebody in either, really. Why don't you just be real stealth and just go for a fucking full-on Hummer?
Exactly, yeah. Beeping your horn as you go.
Yeah. but it's the horn as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not a very stealthy car to tail somebody in.
No. So Patrick unfortunately never made it to the subway, and his body was found floating in the East River over a month later. Now, there's a little bit of post-mortem stuff here, but I'm not 100% sure about whether the detectives had access to the body. Now, as I said, Kevin Gannon was a lead investigator on this case, so I'm sure he would have had a little bit of access to it, but they do have a website which Patrick's post-mortem details are on there, and the way they describe it, the person that works with them, who is now who's a coroner or a forensic person, I think he's just looked at the pictures that they have from that, because a lot of it looks like he has this. So for me, the wording seems that they've not had access to the body, and this has been done after the fact of the autopsy kind of thing. But I'll go into it, because the website's Global Death Investigations, and that's where this information has come from. Now, Patrick's body had a blood level of 0.16 alcohol, and because, something I didn't know, alcohol is produced during the decomposition process, I feel
like there's a niche in the market there.
Yeah.
So we're composting people.
Yeah. Fermentation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So because of the time he'd been missing, so over this month period, he should have had a level of 0.12 going into the water. So he's already 0.04 up. So it shouldn't be more than 0.12. And Patrick was also found on his back in the water. And we've talked about lividity before with Elisa Lam. But there was no lividity on his back. It was on his front. So if he'd been in the water for that amount of time, the blood pooling would, because of gravity, go down. Yeah. So it should have been on his back. But there was none of that. He was found in his jeans and his socks, which means he would have taken his top off and jumped in the river. Like, before he got in the river, he would have taken his top off. But bearing in mind it's February in New York, which is not the right time to go for a swim, really, is it?
But he was a student and he was pissed.
This is one of the things as well where it becomes a little bit... you've got to know kids and what they get up to. No one knows what they get up to. You know, you get up to some...
Students in Durham do it all the time. They take their clothes off and they dive in the river for a laugh and they end up drowning. I
was that smashed, tried to catch a firework, a banger. You know, the bangers that you have. Mm-hmm. Someone threw it at me and I went to either kick it or catch it, but the floor was wet. I slipped and I was splay-legged and the banger was in between my legs and it went off. If I would have been like 2-3 more inches, then I would have been a eunuch by now.
That would have blown your cock off.
It would have blown
and ruined your life.
Yeah, I mean, probably wouldn't have.
But saved one of your hard drives.
Yeah, it changed that much with my life, I suppose. But
you would have had a full hard drive's worth of space.
Well, yeah, Jesus Christ, I wouldn't be able to do anything with it. Right. That's great, but hello.
I thought you were watching it for the storyline.
Oh yeah, I just watch it for the articles. So yeah, and then there was another thing that was observed in this autopsy. Now, fly eggs were observed to be in his pubes. Now, this is where it gets a little bit weird because flies lay eggs on dead meat, obviously, but only at temperatures of above 52 degrees Fahrenheit. When Patrick went missing, it was sub 40 degrees. So they wouldn't... But
then he was in the water anyway, which would be even colder.
Yeah, so they wouldn't have been out and about. So this is one of the theories that maybe he was kept somewhere before...
Or maybe his pubes were really thick and warm and cosy.
I mean, he was a womanizer. So maybe he had more eggs in there and stuff.
Oh, God.
So there were also ligature marks around his neck and his waist, but not his back. Now, sorry, there were ligature marks around his neck and his waist showed signs of burning, but not his back. So a theory that they've postulated, this is why I think they've just looked at the pictures, because they postulated a theory that he was sat and tied to a chair and then someone's burnt him, so he's got burn marks there, but because the chair's blocking it and the back, he's not got anything on his back. But I think they just looked at pictures and decided that because of the way it's worded.
I don't know whether that's a good methodology for detectives to do, to just go, well, it looks like this could be...
So this is the thing. I think because the official post-mortem was ruled death by drowning, it was ruled an accidental death. I think the thing is that Kevin Gannon's gone away and thought, I'm not having that. That doesn't seem right. Something's wrong. But everybody else has gone, no, death by drowning, done it. And he's gone off on his own to kind of do this, and then he's got other people involved. There's like doctors involved with him. So I think this information is done after the fact.
Yeah, but if when the coroner did the autopsy, the coroner would have seen burn marks and ligature marks on him
Yeah, yeah,
in the autopsy. So what normal person would go, well, this is the normal thing that happens when you drown. You end up with ligature marks and burns all over your body. Fire and water always go well together, you know. Well, no. Why? What?
exactly. And I think this is why Kevin Gannon is so, I don't want to say fixated, but he's so sure that there is this group out there because maybe they've paid off the coroner. It's all very conspiracy theory kind of thing. But then again, got the Long Island serial killers and Son of Sam, and it's, depends how much you want to read into it. So the next victim was 24-year-old Tommy Booth. Well, not the next victim, there's been quite a few, but Tommy Booth, 24, went missing in January 2008. He was out at a bar celebrating a friend's 21st birthday. So again, he's around the age of legally drinking. After the police checked the CCTV, Tommy was seen entering the bar, but he's never actually seen leaving the bar. 2 weeks later, Tommy's body was found in a creek just behind the bar. Now, this area had been searched frequently, and he'd never been seen there before. Like, they didn't, I don't want to say notice him, but he wasn't there when they were searching. The body was in full rigor mortis, which only usually occurs after the first 36 hours. So he should have at least shown some kind of decomposition after this amount of time of being dead, but he was just in rigor mortis. There was also a smiley face graffitied on the back of the bar wall, like in the car park kind of area where it was found. So this is another case which they think that this is, everything's all wrong about it. Maybe he went into the bar, he went out the back door, someone took him out the back door and kept him somewhere for 2 weeks and then dropped him off in the river, playing games with the police, maybe. Then in October of 2009, William Hurley went missing from the Boston area. Now, these are all that. So you've got New York, I think Tommy Booth was in Connecticut, and now we've got Boston. So they're not located to one single place. This is why they not want to believe, but this is why they think it's a network of people. Now, he was watching a Boston Bruins game, and halfway through the match, he started to feel unwell. William called his girlfriend to ask to be picked up. Now, Claire LeBeau was his girlfriend. She turned up at the stadium, but she couldn't find William, and she rang him to find out exactly where he was waiting. Now, William asked someone where he was because he didn't know, and Claire heard another male voice say 99 Nashu Street. William told Claire that his battery was dying and he would wait where he was. Claire obviously turned up there and he was nowhere to be seen. She tried to call him again, but thinking that his battery had died because it just went through to voicemail. So 6 days later, he showed up in the Charles River. He wasn't very far from when he had last spoke to Claire, so he was still near Nashua Street. And he'd received blunt force trauma to the head, and his eye socket was broken. So prior to his disappearance, the CCTV again showed him stumbling through the Bruins car park, and during the autopsy, alcohol and the date rape drug GHB was found within his system. So it's a little bit dodgy. Why would you take GHB yourself? I don't
know, you get them weird people that end up marrying themselves and stuff, don't you? So
well, yeah, I suppose the world is
why should it stop there?
Yeah.
Why not roofie yourself as well? I'll just pop a bit of Rohypnol in here, swirl it around. You saucy minx, you are getting it tonight.
But it seems a little bit counterintuitive if you're going watching a
Oh yeah.
sporting event and you're gonna roofie yourself just to fall asleep at that sporting event. It
Yeah.
a little bit. I get the alcohol because you get pissed at sporting events and whatever,
Yeah.
but taking it a little bit far. But again, his death was ruled as an undetermined drowning. Now the police theorised that he was drunk, he fell into the river, and this is how he got the blunt force trauma and broken eye socket.
Did he have any other wounds or anything?
No, just that.
Just that.
Yeah, so it later turned out that William was one of 10 young men that had drowned in the Charles River. Now, it did say under mysterious circumstances, but if alcohol's involved,
It's not that mysterious.
yeah, especially alcohol's involved. It's October, so it's Boston, it's on the East Coast, it's cold, it's higher up than New York, so
And 10 people in such a big city as well is like how many people live there? You're like millions.
yeah. I mean, people drown all the time, unfortunately. It's
Yeah. Mm.
I was watching something. There was a Noah Ark film. They did a film of Noah Ark in the the very early 20th century, and 3 actors died when they did the flood scene on it.
That's just irony at its
Yeah.
finest.
So they drowned while filming the film.
Good.
Yeah. So that's how easy it is, really, and that's in Hollywood. So.
At least it was accurately depicted.
Well, yeah, exactly. Maybe they were just the evil people that God said He was going to get rid of, and He did through the magic of Hollywood. So the last victim we're going to talk about is Dakota James. Now he was 23, again around the same ballpark figure of all these young men. He went missing while walking back to his apartment on January the 25th, 2017. Again, he'd been on a night out with his friends, and this is in Pittsburgh. So when he failed to show up for work the next day, the bosses of his work rang his parents, informed them, and then after not getting in contact with him, 72 hours later, the parents reported him missing. Now, during the investigation into his disappearance, it was revealed that 6 weeks before he went missing, he'd had an incident. So he texted a friend that he was lost. Didn't know where he was. Now he was a local to the area, so he knew the streets. But he texted his friend. He didn't know where he was. He was very confused about how he'd got to wherever he got to, and when the friend managed to find him, she actually used Find My Phone app or whatever. Dakota was approaching a dark SUV that was parked up on the other side of the road, but it was in the wrong lane. And he couldn't explain what happened to him because he'd had no memory. Since leaving his apartment at 7 p.m. to being picked up, he didn't have any memory of what had happened to him. So after he went missing, after 40 days, Dakota's body was found in the Ohio River, 10 miles away from the last place that he was actually seen. Now, he had no visible marks on his body, but this was strange in itself because for him to end up where he had been, if he had travelled by river from where he was last seen, he would have had to pass through a dam. So
It's quite an achievement.
yeah, so
What is he, ephemeral?
That's going to mess you up a little bit if you've got to go there and you're travelling 10 miles down a river, you're going to bang into stuff. So it's also claimed that the level of decomposition was not as bad as someone that's been in the water for so long and been missing for 40 days. There were apparently ligature marks around his neck, but the autopsy didn't report this, and it wasn't they didn't report it, it's because there was no damage to his throat or his esophagus. They didn't feel like it merited anything. So there's like a little tiny little bone that when you strangle, if you strangled, that bone breaks. So that's kind of the thing they look for. So because that hadn't broken and there was no there wasn't much damage. They didn't think it was that important.
I still think it's important to put stuff like that down. Aren't they supposed to like note like bruises and everything?
Yeah,
Like even if you've had them like from
yeah.
before you
I
even
mean,
died.
I think they did note it down, but it was nothing to do with his actual death.
All right, okay.
I think that's the way they went, because the official cause was that Dakota was drunk, fell into the river, and he drowned. Travelled 10 miles through a dam, and was fine and dandy. Now, these four, they're part of like over hundreds of people that Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte are investigating. Have like looked into hundreds of cases about young men going through, and this is why they actually think that there's this gang out there, and they believe that they communicate on the dark web. So in certain cities, like even though they're far apart, there's been murders on the same night. Or murders. There've been people going missing on the same night, and that's how they think they're coordinating it. But the problem with it is, maybe not the problem with it is, but calling it the smiley face killers is a little bit of a misnomer, because the distance to the actual smiley face that they found, when they think this is their calling card, in some cases it's like more than a mile away, this smiley face.
I'm not being funny, but if you've got a can of like spray paint or something, it is the easiest thing to graffiti on something, isn't it? Like there's you could do it. You do a cock, or you write the word cock, or bell end, or you do a smiley face.
There you go. It is probably the second most common
Yeah.
thing tagged behind cock and balls.
Like, did anybody actually check that it wasn't there before and it has always been there, or it's been there for several years? Because it's just a smiley face, you know. They haven't drawn a Monet or something.
Yeah, exactly. So as a calling card, it is a little bit
It's a weak one.
silly to try and put over
Yeah.
there. I mean, as well, one of the things that they were saying was William Hurley. He'd been in the army. He was a veteran, so they're kind of like, oh well, he shouldn't be overcome that easily. You know, he shouldn't make these mistakes because he's in the army, because he's a veteran. And like we said before, you do stupid things when you're drunk. You don't necessarily mean to do it.
And if you get roofied, well, you can't really help doing stupid things, can you? Because you don't really know what's going on.
Exactly, that's it. And you don't even know. Someone could have just been doing it as a laugh, like dropping that in. I mean, there is, and we will talk about it in a future episode, but there's a Titanic incident where they were all high as kites. They got PCP'd.
Titanic?
Yeah, the film.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was going to say, right, so I was about to say,
oh, no.
I think my conspiracy theory is a lot more plausible than that one. I'm sorry, but I do not believe that the captain and crew all just were off their tits and didn't see a massive iceberg, okay? Mine's much more plausible.
Yeah.
For all you gave me hell about it.
Could be. But yeah.
Right, okay, the movie, yeah, okay.
Yeah, the film.
Okay.
But yeah, so someone could just have that sick sense of humour.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's like the...
But then that doesn't explain the ligature marks or the burns or something.
No, that... I think a couple of these, like, maybe all these four were murders, but I don't think they were involved. I think it was just opportunistic. Like, what are they getting from it?
This is what I'm having trouble with. So I'm thinking like these guys are going missing when they're in pubs, and then I was thinking, well, maybe they're Shanghaied, but then if they were Shanghaied, then they wouldn't wash up because they would just never be found. And then I was thinking, well, what if they were like being like kidnapped for like organ harvesting or something? But then surely the coroner would notice if they were missing any organs, so that's clearly not a thing as well. They were students, so they had any cash. I'm just not quite sure what they're getting out of it. And it's not like they were even, apart from the first guy, it's not like they were even killed in a kind of brutal fashion. They were just kind of drowned. So it's I just don't see what what a murderer is getting out of it. They're not getting a thrill of torture or or anybody's money or any. They're not getting anything out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if they are snuff films, they're not really very good
No.
because they're not doing anything. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like, oh, I love snuff films or anything like that. But I wouldn't, if I
Make them
did,
watchable.
yeah, exactly. Give them a rating. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give people something to watch them for. I mean,
Just
just
like a guy tied to a chair and they're just tickling his feet just until he just can't bear it anymore. And then they push him in the river. I'm just, no.
exactly. It's I don't know, but like you say, there's all sorts of people out there. Like people marry
True.
themselves and whatnot. Maybe it is a thing, but I wouldn't think it's going for top money when there's like red rooms and shit like that on the dark web.
Unless, because they're clearly being held somewhere before they're killed. Because then as well, even if they're drunk and then they just fall in the river when they're drunk, that still wouldn't account for the decomposition not being in such a state that it should be if they'd just fallen in the river the night they were drunk. So what if they're being held somewhere in some kind of slave labor kind of deal, and then when they're not needed anymore, they're just bumped off or something?
I see now. I can get that. I can get that, like maybe like sex trafficking or slave labor or something like that. But then,
They not be malnourished and stuff as well, though.
but surely if they're that young, they've got more than a month's use out of them.
Yeah.
Do you know what? If you were going to that much trouble of picking someone up off the street, putting them into that situation, if you go into all that bother, you try and earn as much as you can out of them.
I mean, maybe it's as simple as these guys owed people money. Maybe they owe people drug money, or students borrow money all the time. Maybe they owed big bad people money, and the big bad people didn't get the money, and then big bad people always have SUVs.
They
And
do, they do. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's like just money related, and they just got bumped off because they were like loan sharks or something. They didn't get paid.
Yeah, that I mean,
No.
it's like Occam's razor, isn't it? It's like sometimes the simplest things are the best. Maybe they were wrong place, wrong time. I
Yeah.
I can't see how there's a network operating.
No, just because as well, if you isn't it that if you throw somebody in the water like destroys any potential DNA off you?
Yeah, yeah, as
So
well.
is it not just the easiest way to dispose of somebody?
Yeah, because
Dump them
then
off.
very little evidence is left behind. Then,
Yeah,
especially when they're in the water for that amount of time, if you can.
because they're not making a point of like covering it up, really, are they? They're just chucking them in the river. So clearly, it's I don't I feel like it's not like a maybe not a premeditated murder. Just maybe it's a kind of right there he is. Give us your cash that you owe us. Oh, I don't have it. Okay, take him to the warehouse. Kind
Yeah,
of, yeah.
yeah, definitely. I think maybe that's it. I mean, in 2008, the FBI did find no links between the deaths. They said that the evidence provided by Gannon and Duarte was just circumstantial, and most of the drownings that happened, they were accidental in nature because they were young guys who were drunk. I mean, there is an argument that Dakota James, he was captain of the swim team, and he could take his drink. So some people have said if he fell in the river, then he'd be able to swim out of it, no problem.
Not if you're really pissed.
But that's it. And as well, Boston, the average temperature in Boston is 2 degrees.
If you fell in the river, you probably might have died of hypothermia or something.
That's it. And it doesn't matter because the shock will hit you.
Yeah, yeah.
So you just instantly go into shock. You could have a cardiac arrest. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. If you go into shock like that and go into a cold environment straight away, you'll just freeze up, and then you try to fight the shock, and you can't swim, and then
Yeah.
that is how you drown. I mean, I think that a lot of these guys, unfortunately, they've lost their lives, obviously, and it is very sad that they were young. But to fall prey to an extensive serial killer network is, I think, a little bit of a stretch. But that being said, you're obsessed with the son of Sam and the
I am,
Long
but
Island issues. So
I am, but they all have like an MO.
yeah,
They all have something in common, you know.
they
These guys, the only thing they had in common is that they're drowned, not the way that they were killed or anything. And then they're relative same ages,
yeah,
you
and
know.
the merit to them is the son of Sam is snuff films. They're
Yep.
like they're being filmed. You're actually watching someone get brutally murdered, shot in the face, shot 3 times, whatever. And Long Island serial killers is sex workers, they're sex trafficking. That's kind of what's happening there. So there's
Yeah,
some reward. Don't want to say reward, but there's some reward for the killers
there's something in it for them. Yeah.
that are involved in that. Whereas this, it just seems a little bit opportunistic. I think you said it the best. I think maybe they owed people money who they shouldn't have owed money, and as well, New York, Boston, Connecticut, they've got. I mean, there's nasty people in all cities, but historically, Boston and New York, mafia people are there, and they don't really give a shit.
And like I said before, like there's millions and millions of people that live there. Like 100 people being murdered over however many over a decade or something. Doesn't seem to me like a large amount, like a large volume, any more than anywhere else,
Yeah,
any other big city like London or something like that.
yeah.
You know,
It's not something that's jumping out. It's like the Manchester Pusher, like that we covered previously. That's isolated to one place, so
yeah,
I can see why that kind of got raised up and that's been looked into, kind of thing. But this being so spread out, and like you say, what's America got? 400 million people
yeah,
there.
exactly.
How many people are falling in rivers every day
I mean, I
over
bet more
there?
than 100 people in London die a year, and that's a significantly smaller place than Boston and New York. So I don't think it's an out of this world large amount of people to be killed. I
Yeah,
think it's crime just sucks, and that's just for me not a massive. If people were being killed in the same way, and there was a number of witnesses that had seen the same thing at the same time, and you could see that there was a pattern and that there was something in it for the killers, I could totally get on board. But I'm just like, there's nothing in it for them
yeah,
other than that if you don't have my money, you don't have a life. So kill him now.
yeah. I mean, like, bless them, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, for trying to find some closure for the families and putting the work in. But I just think it's like they're seeing hoof prints and thinking zebra rather than horses, and they're just trying to pluck something that isn't really there. But
Do you think horse? I would think cow.
yes, but they've got a very distinct. Horses have got a different footprint from. I did
Yeah,
almost
true.
say cow, but then I remembered that they've got a distinct hoof print.
I see you just said hoof, so I just straight away thought cow. I don't know. I'd make a
Okay.
rubbish detective.
Yeah. Okay. Well then, yeah. Okay. They see hoof prints. They think cow. Uh,
You
Clearly, they
didn't
should be
state
thinking
what
zebra.
kind of hoof. Okay.
Fine. Fair enough.
Thinking of a field, and I'm thinking, I look out and there's more cows in the fields than there is horses. Okay, so if I see a bunch of prints, automatically I would think that they were cows, unless I really leaned in and went, yeah, it's got a U shape. That's a horse print, that.
I think the point of my argument was there isn't any zebras around the area. Do
Yes, I know what your
you
point
know
was.
what I mean? It wasn't anything to do with cows or horses. It was more to do with the zebras being the odd one out there. Really? But fine.
It's a bad analogy, okay?
Right, fine. On that bombshell, This has been the MO podcast with me, Contumacious-san.
And me, Atreya.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and we shall see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
The MO podcast. The MO podcast. The MO podcast. The MO podcast.